Greetings from Doc Ock this evening. Hope everybody's feeling real fine and had a day that was really divine. All right, we're here tonight for the next course in our 7-course meal. Actually, it's more like a 31-course meal because this is number 31, part 31 of the story Never Caught. The story of Ona Judge. We're going to be reading that in just a minute. Let's not forget our proverb. I almost forgot. Let me remember to read the proverb for today, which is, I like this one. Here we go. I haven't read this one in a while. Aliye ju mgoje chini. Aliye ju mgoje chini. Wait at the bottom for the one who is at the top. Because what goes up, you know it's got to come down. Nobody stays up forever, except my dad. He never did come down. Yep. But in general, as a rule, what goes up does not come down. What goes up must come down. Now, let's go ahead with our story for tonight. Never Caught. The story of Ona Judge, an enslaved African woman who escapes from the clutches of George and Martha Washington. This is chapter 26, part 31, chapter 26. The Survivor. If this story were fiction, this would be the time to say that Ona Judge lived happily ever after. But this ain't fiction. This is real. George and Martha had both died, and Ona was living in faraway New Hampshire. But this story is not fiction. And while Ona definitely had happy moments, the rest of her life in New Hampshire was filled with immense hardship. We know from census records and the interviews Ona gave to journalists at the end of her life that she had 2 more children after Eliza, William, born in 1800, and Nancy, born in 1802. Ona continued to navigate her way through the joys of parenthood, marriage, and life outside of slavery during the very early 1800s. But her and Jack were constantly dealing with the same realities of poverty that Ona had witnessed when she worked with the white servants in New York City. When George Washington was first elected president, there was never enough money. Ona would work as a maid in homes as much as she could while still making sure her small children were cared for. Jack would spend days and weeks and months away on sea voyages in order to be given that lump sum payment that was so necessary for his family to survive. When Jack died in 1803, Ona had again to reach back into her reservoir of strength and figure out a way to keep her family alive. There's no information about the circumstances of Jack's death. We just know that his death notice appeared in the New Hampshire Gazette on May 3rd, 1803. Ona first had an opportunity to work for a neighboring family, the Bartletts, but she turned down the job when she discovered that she could not bring along her young children. She would have looked for other jobs, but the same problem would have persisted. People wanted maids, not maids with babies tagging along. Ona decided to turn back to the family that had sheltered her and Eliza when Burwell Bassett, the nephew of the Washingtons, had showed up on her doorstep, the Jacks. This was the family who had opened their doors to Ona and Eliza in 1799. Phyllis Jack was the matriarch of the family, and in a surprising turn of events, the owner of both the home and the land on which it stood. Land ownership was very rare, especially for free black women. Phyllis had been given the home by her former slave owner, the religious Deacon James Brackett, who had freed her in the 1760s. Often, a white owner who had become excessively fond of a black female slave gave her a home so that he could always see her whenever he wished. And perhaps this is what happened between Deacon Brackett and Phyllis Jack. Alternatively, Deacon Brackett could have chosen a more uncommon path. He could have given Phyllis Jack the land and the home with no strings attached, just out of the goodness of his heart. The end result was that Phyllis and her family lived in a home that straddled the border between Greenland and Stratham, New Hampshire. Phyllis's husband was called by many names: Jack Warner, the last name of his former slave owner, John Jack, Black Jack, and Jacks. He had earned his freedom by serving in the Revolutionary War. Phyllis and John had two daughters, Nancy and Phyllis. Now, in 1803, Ona moved back to the house with her three children, but tragedy struck again when Phyllis died in October 1804, just a year after Ona's husband, Jack Staines, had passed away. Despite owning the home, the Jack and Staines families had become almost completely penniless, with not enough money to give Phyllis an honorable funeral. Luckily, private citizens stepped in to cover the cost of the burial. The two families merged and scraped together as much money as they could to keep a roof over their heads, food in their bellies, and clothes on their backs. But like other struggling black families, it proved impossible. Ona had to agree to let her daughters Eliza and Nancy move to the nearby farm of Nathan Johnson for 8 months. In return for providing food and shelter for Eliza and Nancy, Nathan would receive $35 from the town government. Ona's daughters would be put to work in the fields and in the home as servants to the 6 members of the Johnson family. It was probably around this same time, 1816, that Ona and Jack's only son, William, left to become a sailor. Life in Greenland had become too difficult for him, and despite Ona's best efforts to clothe and feed him, William knew he had to set off on his own. He left Greenland for the seaports along the East Coast and was never again recorded as a New Hampshire resident. Ona was now living in the Jack home with Nancy and Phyllis Jack and their father, John Jack. By 1817, John Jack had died too. Eliza and Nancy had returned, but the house seemed to be an inescapable place of misery. All 5 women did odd jobs, domestic work, and anything they could to bring in additional income. Both Nancy and Eliza Staines had become known for their artistic ability, and as they grew into adulthood, they began to sell their sketches to wealthy Portsmouth families. This definitely helped. But the one practical method that women of this and all time periods had often used to ensure stability, marriage, evaded the women in the Jack home. Ona did not remarry, and none of the younger women, Nancy and Eliza Staines and Phyllis and Nancy Jack, ever married at all. Over the next several years of the antebellum period, little changed for the women except that the small house began to show signs of aging. The women who lived there were just happy to have a roof over their heads. Poverty's roots were too deep. More suffering lay in wait for Ona. No parent ever wants to outlive their children, but that was Ona's fate. Eliza succumbed to a long illness on February 16, 1832, when she was 34, and Nancy died the following year, on September 11, 1833, also from an illness. Immediate and useful medical care was still a haphazard business in the early 1800s, particularly for women who were as poor as Ona, Eliza, and Nancy. The 3 women had experienced lives filled with challenges, concerns about hunger, forced servitude, and the ever-present fear of slave catchers. Ona had done the best she could, but now in her late 50s, she was once again alone. Ona had been through so much. She had made heroic decisions and stood up to the most powerful man in the country, and yet she was confronted constantly with the loss of the people who meant the most to her. It was ultimately her faith in God Almighty and a fervent conversion to Christianity that carried Ona Marie Judge Staines through the most difficult periods of her life. When she had escaped to New Hampshire, Ona had begun attending Reverend Samuel Haven's South Church in Portsmouth. Later, she became a Baptist after hearing the sermons of Elias Smith, a traveling preacher who moved to Portsmouth in 1802. Once she moved in with the Jack family, Ona probably attended the Baptist church in Stratham, only a mile's walk from her home. At some point during her time in New Hampshire, she had learned how to read. This would have put Ona on the same path as many other free African Americans, whose literary rates climbed during the first half of the 19th century. She read the Bible over and over again, believing its central creed that she would see her beloved family again in heaven. Decades later, it was probably Ona's connection to the Baptist church in Stratham that brought Reverend Thomas Archibald to Ona's doorstep. Reverend Thomas Archibald asked to interview Ona about her past for an abolitionist newspaper called the Granite Freeman. At this time in 1845, Ona was close to 73 years old. She was finally ready to talk. It was almost 49 years to the day since she had escaped from Philly. In the interview in the Granite Freeman and in a later interview with the abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator, once again, Ona told the world her story. A week after her interview with the Granite Freeman was published, the paper announced the publication of a new autobiography called Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. Douglass, another fugitive, became world famous for his brilliant writing and activism for the equality of all African Americans, with Ona's children deceased and her advanced age keeping her from being pulled back into slavery. She was no longer fearful of being returned to the Custis heirs. She answered Reverend Archibald's questions with honesty and a smile that played upon her withered countenance. She questioned George Washington's religious practices and went on to say that Miss Washington used to read prayers, but I don't call that praying. Yeah, she did do some praying, but it was a whole different kind, more like a praying mantis. When asked if she was sorry to have left the Washingtons, particularly because her life had been so difficult and sorrow-filled since she'd escaped to New Hampshire, she replied with strength and the calm wisdom of a woman who'd had the courage to do what was morally right. No, I am free, and have, I trust, been made a child of God by the means. Ona's interview in The Liberator on January 1st, 1847 introduced her story to thousands of readers across the nation, permanently linking her to the crusade for black freedom in the years leading up to the Civil War. A little over a year later, in February 1848, a doctor named George Odell paid a call to the Jack household, where only Nancy Jack and Ona Staines resided. Dr. Odell's house call was most likely to treat Ona, now close to 75 years old. But whatever cures or treatment he may have prescribed were unsuccessful. On February 25, 1848, 11 days after the doctor's visit, Ona Marie Judge Staines was carried away, not by slave catchers, but by her God. And there you have it, the story of Ona Marie Staines. So I will read the epilogue, I believe. I'll read the epilogue tomorrow night. And that'll be, oh, wait a minute. Tonight is Sunday night. Oops. Tomorrow is Monday. So I will not read the epilogue. I'll leave the epilogue alone. Okay? So that'll be the last segment. That was part 31.
It's 9:30.
Thank you very much for letting us know what time it is. And our presentation for tonight is completed, with the exception of telling all the little children that might be out there and were listening to this story that, as you can see, in spite of all odds, it is possible for you to do some things that would be considered beyond belief because most people would give up under the stress and the strain. But if you can persevere, you can, quote unquote, overcome. But perseverance is a must. So I hope everybody got something out of that story. I thought it was a great story. It was fairly well written. I would have preferred it was written in the first person, but so be it. Meanwhile, all you little children, you know what it's time to do. It's time to lay your little head on your little pillow, on your little bed. Close those your eyes and wait for that sun to rise. And when you see that big old sun raising up in the sky and feel those sunbeams beaming down on your eyes, you know it's time for you to rise and shine and greet a new day as if it's divine, because this ain't no line. Meanwhile, all you adults out there, you know what I need you to do? Go ahead, give us a like and a thumbs up, and then go ahead and subscribe to our Tubular Black Facts channel. The only place in the internet universe you can get stories like this. How do you say? Oh, like books on tape, but from a black perspective. That's right. So continue to tune in. We've got more good stuff in store. This is the month of May, and we will be refocusing now on the life of Malcolm X, otherwise known as El Haj Malik El Shabazz, because he was born in this month. So we want to celebrate his life next. Be here or be square, sitting over there. Peace out, y'all. And let me just say goodnight to Fela and Esther. Peace out.